Western Sydney doesn't wait for permission, it builds. Welcome to Westside Stories Beyond the CBD, the podcast where I sit down with the people shaping the engine room of Sydney. I'll chat with the leaders and community builders whose stories are bigger than a job title and whose impact is felt right across the West. Each episode is a real conversation about the moments that changed everything, the risks that paid off, the mistakes that hurt, and the lessons worth stealing. I'm Johnston. Let's get into today's story. All right, so we're lucky enough to have Anthony Boyd join us today for an episode of the Westside Stories. Anthony, welcome.
Thank you. No, it's really nice to be here with you.
It's great to be talking with you. We might kick it off by why don't you tell us something that probably only your wife might know about you, something interesting that you like to do outside of work.
Oh, she would probably say it would be fitness.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be exercise of some description. There's probably not many days in a week that I don't do something.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to fitness. So it's probably not obvious to people when they meet me. Like I'd normally do it quite early in the morning, whether it's a run or go to the gym.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'd be something that probably not a lot of people know.
Okay. All right. We'll come back and talk about that because I know that's part of your routine
Yeah,
and it helps you at work.
Definitely.
But let's just analyse your career quickly to date. So you started out, you did your PY.
Yeah, that's when it was called PY.
When it was called PY.
I say that now to a couple of people and they go, what's that? Yeah, so I actually started straight after school with a cadetship at Pricewaterhouse at the time, before it was PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Yep.
Which turned out to be an awesome way to do the degree. So it was 2+2.
Yep.
To be honest, I don't even know if they still do that as an option.
Right.
But I mean, I did my 3-year degree over 4 years, but had a couple of years of work experience in that time. So when I finished my degree, I went straight into the professional year, the Chartered Accounting program, and became chartered after another 2 years of that. So I was quite young then, you know, with enough experience and with a qualification to become a manager quite young at Pricewaterhouse at the time. I was there for 8 or 9 years and loved it, to be honest. It was a great grounding to understand a couple of things. One was just generally how the business world works, working on a lot of different clients, different sectors of different industries. So had a great opportunity to learn a lot in that time. And then at the end of that time, I actually was actually a rugby contract. I was offered to go over and play overseas. So I moved to Hong Kong for 4 years.
Right.
And was always going to be a work and football thing. So I worked over there for 4 years for John Swire and Sons, which predominantly in the Cathay Pacific business, which again was a great first move out of Chartered because it became much more commercially focused. It was still predominantly finance roles, but I was doing things like project financing. So it was a lot more commercial. Got to travel a lot. So for a kid who's sort of grown up in Sydney and pretty much had his whole life and career in Sydney to that point, suddenly was working in all sorts of places around the world. And when we came back from Hong Kong after 4 years, I started at Australand, which became the start of a 20-year career phase at sort of Australand, which then became Frasers.
Yes.
And moved all the way from sort of like a financial controller type role at the beginning in the corporate team, sort of moving out through the divisions. I spent some time in finance roles out in sort of the divisions, out in the residential development business, and then moved all the way out through a general management role in Victoria. Moved up to become the EGM of that business. So that was my sort of first sort of, I guess, role at that executive level. Yep. Spent a number of years in that role and then moved across through the CFO role very briefly to then become the CEO of FPA, which was an awesome opportunity, to be honest. A great business, a great bunch of people and a great thing for me to be able to experience all those different roles.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just go back a little bit, and then we'll unpack that journey to CEO or MD. So when you join P Dubs back in the day, they work hard. They work you hard. What lessons did that teach you? That hard work and the hours that you got to put in to be successful in that job?
Yeah, I think it was the start of a realization for me that you just had to be really disciplined about your work. Like that long hours didn't actually mean great work. Like it was something that I was probably lucky enough to buck the trend on a little bit. Like there were definitely times where we worked really hard.
Yeah.
But I think my experience of it was that I was playing rugby at the time, and so I would leave for footy training. And I guess the partners at the time, my team at the time, realised that's what I'd be doing. So I used to start early,
Right.
and then just make sure I'd finish what I needed to finish before I would go to footy training. So it was a good eye opener for me because, I still believe in a lot of ways that just working monumental hours doesn't always lead to the most productive outcome or the best outcome.
Yeah.
I think everyone realises at an executive level, you've got to push yourself. You've got to get out of your comfort zone. You've got to be prepared to work hard. There's no question. I think the key that I learned was balance.
Right. Okay. And have you planned your career? How have these opportunities come about?
I've had this conversation a lot with people over the time. I haven't.
Okay.
Like that's the short answer. It's sort of ironic because I will often help people with their own career plans, and often, if that's what makes them feel more comfortable about how they're I guess looking at their career and I guess being pragmatic about trying to plan that, I will often help them do that. But my experience has been very different. I think it's always been in the back of my mind that if whatever I'm doing at the time, do that with as much effort as you can, like do as great a job as you can possibly do in that role.
Yeah.
Obviously bringing the right attitude to that and sort of having that ability to expand that wherever you get that opportunity. Put your hand up for things,
right.
Be aware of what's around you, what that might look like. My experience has been there's always then been an opportunity that's presented itself.
Right.
And they haven't always been up either. Like, when you think about org structures, often people think the pathway for me is up, like into my manager's role or into promotions. Often what I've done is moved sideways or just broadened what I've been doing, adjacent. And that's provided opportunities then to move up over time. So, I haven't, I feel very fortunate, I must admit. These things often require luck and timing and fortune. Maybe luck's not the best word, but there is an element of luck that goes with it. But, I feel very fortunate that I've been able to be given some of those opportunities.
Yeah.
And then I guess it's just been that same attitude of just do the best possible job you can do in that at that time, and then the future will look after itself to some degree.
Yeah. And do you tell people that you're reporting to, your managers or mentors, do you tell them what you're seeking in terms of opportunities? Do you put it out there? And
definitely.
You do?
Definitely. And I wouldn't say to the point of being sort of, single-minded about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've looked at every opportunity to sort of have an open conversation with my boss. I guess what I've always tried to do in my career is almost think like my boss, or even think like my boss's boss. It's just been something that I've always kind of done, to think, okay, if they're asking me to do this, I wonder what's behind that.
Right.
Is there something else I should be thinking? Is there another opportunity that I could maybe bring something back to them, So and I guess what that's done is given me an ability to maybe think like, well, what's the board wanting to think about with this? Or when we're putting a budget together or a strategy together, what's important to kind of pull out of that? Not just what I've been asked to do, but the broader picture.
Yeah.
And then when I've been able to kind of think like that, it's then just been allowed, it's probably allowed me to have very organic conversations with the leaders in businesses that I've been part of. And as I said, it hasn't been either single-minded or it hasn't been demanding at all. It's just been more that you're quite open and transparent about, I guess, what you really enjoy doing, where you may see an opportunity to put yourself, I guess, in that business in the context of the org structure, etc. And then obviously respond to that when it comes back the other way,
right?
Because it might not be exactly always what you desire, or it might not be exactly how you picture it, but often those leaders will give people those opportunities. And I'm super conscious of that now as a leader, that idea of that I was given so many great opportunities to do something that was either bigger than the current role or adjacent to that current role or be part of a bigger project that was going to give me exposure or, just and have an interest in it. So I'm super conscious now of being able to do that for others.
Yeah.
I think that's a key part of leadership.
Yeah, yeah. We'll come back and talk about that. That's a good point. Now, I know you've spoken about this before, but that transition, and again, I've sort of been chatting with CFOs who have wanted to move up into CEO roles forever and a day, but not many do. You got that opportunity and you took it. How did you talked about the mindset of thinking like your boss. How much change did your mind have to go through from moving from finance into a CEO role?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Right.
It is a lot because when you become, I guess, fixated on the things that you're delivering in a finance role, you can get quite narrow because there's plenty of, there's only so many hours in the day, and as you said before, people are busy doing those roles, so it's hard in a lot of ways to let your mind go outside of that. I probably made 2 transitions out of finance into kind of what I'd call general management. Mm-hmm. The first one wasn't at the CFO level. It was moving from sort of a general manager of sort of finance commercial role across to be a GM of a business unit. Mm-hmm. That was the first one. The second one was then I sort of came back through the CFO channel and moved out of the CFO role into the CEO role.
Right.
If I'm being honest, it was the first one that felt like the biggest leap.
Right.
And I think that's because up till that point, I had just been a finance professional.
Yeah.
I'd always been interested in the broader businesses and always kind of probably asked questions and asked to go out on the projects or find out more about the broader business, but you're still a finance person.
Yeah.
And when I was given the opportunity to go and be a general manager, I then realized, wow, I'm a bit out of my depth here, right? On a lot of things, whether it was sales and marketing or, construction or project management, whatever that was, realizing that you're not the expert in that is a big mind shift.
Yeah.
Because that's probably my first real experience of then having to step back and go, okay, I'm not the expert here, but I've got the experts around me.
Yeah.
So rather than try to be the expert, how do I just facilitate them, being, I guess, leaders in their own right? How do they step up themselves? And by virtue of them being successful, then as a leader of those guys, you become successful yourself.
Yeah. So some people have sat on these podcasts and talked to me about feeling like an imposter in their role and suffering from imposter syndrome, and particularly when you moved from those safety roles to the uncomfortable roles. Is that something you felt over your career? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, there's been definite times. I don't know if I ever defined it specifically as imposter syndrome, but there's definitely times I was well aware that I was out of my depth.
Right.
And I remember actually a couple of times where my boss had basically said to me when he promoted me into a role that I should automatically be thinking about how to leave that role.
Right.
And at the time I'm thinking, mate, I'm going to struggle enough just doing this role. Like I already feel out of my depth enough. And so there was no doubt that idea of, am I good enough to do this? Like, am I smart enough? The person that was doing this before me, I admired, I looked up to, they seemed smarter, all of those things. And I guess the way I dealt with it was just being myself. Just having the confidence, I guess, to just go, well, I can't do it as he would have done it.
Yeah.
I can't think through the lens of what would he say. I've just got to ask the questions that I would ask, and I guess hope that, and it probably comes back to a little bit of a rugby analogy, but that idea that I didn't select myself for the position.
Yes.
So someone's obviously seen something in me that they've wanted me to do the role.
Right.
So just have enough confidence to go, well, maybe just do it the way you do it.
Yeah.
But it's not to say that the imposter syndrome doesn't go away. Like I think it's a natural human thing that people look at and go, well, am I good enough? Am I capable? Is this too big a step? Am I going to be found out? Do I know enough or whatever? But I think in the end, you just got to take it step by step and have the confidence to ask the right questions and be yourself. And I think people will help you along that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess a common theme on this podcast is at some point in people's career when they rise to executives, they stop being technical and they become leaders. And I guess that's what you're talking about right there, yeah?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it's being able to let go of that technical expertise, right? Because for so long, and look, my experience is in the finance channel. I'm sure the people that I speak to that have done the finance stuff, it's a bit of a niche skill set, right? Like it's not as if anyone can sort of jump in and be the finance person. There's quite a lot of technical expertise. There's quite a lot of on the job knowledge that people have.
Yeah.
And the natural thing I think for a lot of people is to gravitate back to their comfort zone. Like what do they know? How do they do those things? So the leadership step is really being able to let go of that comfort zone and empower other people to do it, even if it might not be the way you do it.
Yeah.
Being able to empower someone to do that, that's that first part of leadership for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you gain credibility when you moved into the GM role, when people knew that you're a finance guy and not a marketing person? How did you then understand how to lead and guide them and mentor them without having the technical knowledge?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from a credibility point of view, I think it comes down to authenticity.
Right.
Because I think if I had have approached it by trying to be as smart as them or try to pretend like I was as knowledgeable as them on that sort of stuff, I would have lost that credibility from the outset. So my own experience was I sort of lent into it.
Right.
You know, I would say outright, you know what, I'm not an expert on this.
Yeah.
You know, I can remember having lots of conversations with, say, that, you know, the sales and marketing teams around the strategy of launching a new project or, you know, selling a certain type of product and saying, well, you know, what would you do?
Yeah.
Let me like, and maybe there's questions there that you sort of start to just have an instinct for asking. But for me, it was just really being interested. I think the thing was that it was just fascinating for me, that it was a key driver of the business, that, you know, sales and marketing, customer experience, that sort of that frontier that you're dealing with customers, that's fascinating in any business.
Yeah.
Then work back from that. How are we set up to deal with that? How are we positioning ourselves in the market, our competitive landscape? That sort of stuff's just fascinating. So I think because I was just interested and not the expert, I would just ask a lot of questions.
Right.
And then just ask for guidance as well, you know, because I figured anyone around that leadership table, once you become, you know, a general manager, the people that you are reporting to you, they've all got different backgrounds.
Yeah.
You know, some of them are going to have, like we said, sales and marketing backgrounds. Some are going to come from finance. Some might come out of, you know, engineering, whatever that might be. And so it's really just being able to give them all that I guess that confidence to go, well, you belong here. Like your ability now to step up is going to make us all better as a team.
Yeah.
And you know, ideally, just working out as a leader when to help people, like when they're going to need that sort of help, and that might just be almost like emotional support often rather than technical support.
Yeah.
And then also when to get out of the way,
right,
and let them do that. You know, give them the confidence and that autonomy and the responsibility to do things. Because I think, at least my experience has been, great people want those things in their roles. As a leader, you're going to have the most influence over them getting those things.
Yeah.
So making sure you're aware of that and giving them that opportunity is crucial.
And then when do you know someone's not succeeding in their role?
Yeah, it could come up in a few different ways. You know, in my experience, I think it could be that it's super obvious. You know, it could just be that everyone's aware of a deadline or a key project or something, and it's clear that someone's not delivering.
Yeah.
It could be that they're doing those things, but they're a bit withdrawn or they're not themselves, I guess, in a certain way. So for me, it was always about knowing who people are,
right,
how they thrive, what they're good at doing, and what their normal sort of personality type is like.
Yeah.
And then seeing when that's not at its optimal level.
Right.
You know, and because it's not always obvious, you know, at a point in time that someone might not be delivering. They've already got to that level through whatever reason. You know, no one really flukes their way totally through their career.
Yeah.
Some people might be promoted beyond their capabilities, for a period of time or whatever, but generally things get found out over time. So generally, if people have found their way into an executive team or quite a senior role, they're probably competent.
Yes.
It could just then be, what are the other factors that are driving that?
Right.
But in saying all of that, when you are aware of it, to me, leadership's definitely critical about addressing that quickly.
Yeah.
Because it's not just impacting that person, it's probably clear to the team that that's something that's not optimal.
Right.
And it could be a lot of different reasons, but I think that the best businesses and the best leaders are the ones that can act on those things, because I think there are so many things in human behavior that just suggest if people aren't in the optimal sort of situation and it's not aligned with, the factors that allow them to be optimal in their own capabilities, that it's probably best that they're not in that space.
Right.
So often you can be doing people a favour by actually having those conversations rather than ignoring it.
Yeah. And just on that point, some people find it hard to have difficult conversations. Where did you learn that skill to be open and honest with people? Because it doesn't come natural to everyone.
No, it's right, and it's actually not easy. It's not easy because there's that tipping point between wanting to be the sort of person people like working for, that you want to have some degree of I guess enjoyment in roles and that sort of stuff. So you're probably leaning towards that idea of how do people respect you as a leader and those sort of things.
Yeah.
But I actually think they go hand in hand.
Right.
Because if you're always willing to lean in and have those conversations, then I think people are always better off as a result of it, rather than just having to pick and choose when to do it.
Yeah.
But going back to your question around when I learned, it was, to be honest, it was probably back in my rugby days, because that's probably where I first, really saw the power of sort of brutal conversations.
Right.
And it's probably so obvious at that level when you're doing a video analysis, or someone's giving you critical feedback on how you've played a game.
Yeah.
It can be brutal, right? Like it can be hard in your mouth type stuff, because it can be as simple as, well, you missed that tackle, or you weren't in the right position for that attacking move, or whatever it is, and we've got to work out why and fix that up.
Yeah.
And so hearing that level of I guess the combination of sort of high performance and the ability to give honest feedback, really transparent feedback, albeit in a completely different context, probably allowed me to understand how powerful that can be.
Yeah.
And I think I've probably carried that into my professional career.
Yeah. And you played rugby at a high level. You played in the Hong Kong Sevens, yeah?
I did.
You played in the Hong Kong Sevens. You played first grade for Norths.
So Norths here in Sydney, yeah.
In Sydney?
Yeah. I mean, look, I feel very fortunate to have played at that sort of level. I wouldn't consider myself a great footballer by any stretch. I worked hard, like I trained hard, and it was, I really devoted a lot of time to it.
Yeah.
But like I wasn't as good as a lot of the players I played with. I know that for a fact. But it was just awesome to be able to be part of those team environments and those club environments. It was intoxicating for me as a young, sort of teen. I always played at school. Like, school was always sport filled, and my whole childhood was always about sport. I love sport. Yeah. So it was never a chore or never something that I didn't want to do. To then be able to do it in that sort of semi-professional era where it was, you're playing with these amazing players and playing against amazing players, and then testing yourself in that sort of environment. It was awesome. Yeah. But I sort of, I look back and I think I was just so fortunate to have played with, and against a lot of great players.
Well, just a quick one. This is why I love these conversations. Western Sydney is full of people doing big things quietly, and the lessons are practical. If this episode resonates, follow the show and share it with one person who'll get value back from it. Back to it. And now you won a premiership in second grade.
Yes.
And but some of the names because how many games did you play in first grade? Was it 40, 50?
Yeah, I played about 40 games in first grade.
About 40 games. But some of the names of those people that kept you out of first grade for a while were quite phenomenal. Without going into detail, what did they teach you, some of these Wallabies that were playing in that North's first grade side, what did they teach you about life and about what maybe something you brought into business from them?
Yeah, there's so much. And I probably didn't realize it at the time. I sometimes wish I had my 50-year-old head on my 20-year-old body,
Right.
so I could have, could have just been more aware of what was happening at the time. I think it just becomes such a blur.
Yeah.
But I was fully aware in saying all of that there were a couple of things. One was just hard work.
Yeah.
That the guys who were the best players in the club, and we had great players all the way down to like 5th and 6th grade.
Yeah.
At that time. We were a really successful club, and there were some players that were in those lower grades that were phenomenal players, so let alone the guys that were, playing first grade every week.
Yeah.
But they all worked hard.
Right.
And often the guys who were, playing for the Wallabies at the time or contracted to the state, the Super Rugby sides, were the ones who worked the hardest.
Right.
They'd get to training first, and they'd be the ones doing extras after training finished. And so that was a great lesson. The other one that I think in retrospect was that I learned very early, leadership's not about a title.
Right.
That idea of putting the team before yourself, building teams and just being someone who people want to follow. You don't have to be anointed as that. You don't have to be called something different. These are just individuals that just had those skills and those capabilities. And yeah, getting exposure to those guys. And look, at some of those were the Wallabies guys, but some of them weren't. Some of them were just really good, first grade leaders who just the way they played, the way they went about, how they did it.
Yeah.
You just couldn't help but follow them.
Right.
And that was sort of a really big lesson for me, because I see it now in my corporate life.
Yes.
And I've seen it ever since. Is that you get organisations that everything's built on a hierarchy, and even at those football clubs, there's still there's a captain and a vice captain and a club captain and all those sorts of things. But same as an organisation structure, it doesn't necessarily need to be the CEO or the head of that department that is actually providing a lot of the leadership in the team. Leadership's about just doing things the right way, about attitude that people bring every day, the effort they put in, and people can become leaders at all levels of an organisation.
Yeah.
And that's probably the other lesson that I sort of took out of those rugby days.
Yeah, yeah, and friendships.
Oh, that's the other. Yeah, totally. And my mates now, like out of all those, I feel very privileged. My life's been I feel very fortunate to have had lots of great groups through my life, and I love school. I love that sort of period after school. But my closest mates now are my rugby mates.
Yeah,
and I look back at that and think that none of that's about status. None of that's about what any of us have done in our careers. None of it's who does what and how important people might be in their own businesses. This is just about people that were just good people who you spend a lot of time with and you just admire from the point of view of the fact that they turn up. And rugby's an interesting one too. Being a contact sport, often these guys are putting their body on the line for the team. And you see them do this stuff and you think, mate, it's so admirable. You just can't help but sort of admire them doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's definitely synergies between the sport you've spoken about and corporate and what people are achieving as a team within a business. But let's take it a step further. I mean, you believe in work-life balance, even at your level. Tell us how you achieve that and why you think it makes you better at work.
Yeah, I think it's critical, and it's probably something, as we said before, that started when I was quite young, and it was probably the fact that I just knew that rugby training was on at X time.
Right.
Say it was 6:30 on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. We played on a Saturday. We did a recovery on a Sunday. Whatever that was, I just knew that you were going to devote a fair bit of time to it.
Yeah.
And prioritising that. And so then working backwards from that and saying, well, if you're going to prioritise that and you've got to put yourself in the best position, to play as well as you can or be as fit as you can or just to, manage injuries as best you can, whatever that is, you've just got to be prepared to spend the time doing that. But you can't, some of the professional guys could spend their whole lives doing it, but everyone else was working.
Yeah.
So how do you balance those things? So for me, it was always saying, you just, whatever you're doing, do that at its full intensity.
Yeah.
So when you're at work, do that to its full intensity, work as hard as you possibly can. Get what you need to get done.
Yeah.
And then when you know you've got to leave at 5:30 or whatever else to get to training, well, then you do that.
Yeah.
And I guess I've just been able to hold that through. Like it's obviously it's a lot easier now without the actual time commitments to a team.
Yep.
But I still prioritize that sort of that alternative to just being at work all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I've always thought most humans, most people that are sort of ambitious in their career and want to, be the best they can at home in their families, that's generally the two things they will always prioritize.
Yeah.
And often it can default to only having those two things.
Right.
And I just think having something else, whether that's, and it sounds like it might sound selfish, but, I don't think that's a negative thing, because I actually think if you know you're going to be better by feeling that you're fit, or that you've had some time to yourself running of a morning, or you've been to the gym and you feel stronger and, happier, and you've had the endorphins runs, whatever that is, if that makes you better at work and it makes you better when you get home, then it's not actually that selfish. It's just then the discipline to maintain it.
Yeah.
And I know I'm quite lucky in that regard that I've never not had the desire to do it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people I talk to go, I'd love to exercise more, I just can't be bothered, or I don't have the motivation. Can't find the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I reckon I'd always challenge that.
Yeah.
To be fair, because I think everyone could find the time if they really wanted to. I think it's probably like a bit of an excuse to go, well, if I'm just not totally motivated, then that's an easy one to pin it on.
Right.
And I get it. I get that some people aren't as motivated to do it. I've just always thought, I know you're awesome at it too. I'd love to hear more about, the time you spend preparing for and running and getting fit. But the key is, if you are prepared to allocate the time to it, you never regret it.
Yeah.
And I think it then becomes a virtuous cycle.
Yes.
I think it can work one or two ways. I mean, would that be your experience too? Once you're in a good rhythm with it and you're prioritizing it, then it's something that becomes easier.
Yeah.
And it just becomes part of the routine.
Yeah. It's about building good habits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Building habits.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you think about you're obviously very efficient with your time at work and time management. For those people that maybe need some help with that, how do you make it work?
I just don't compromise on some of those things that I really want to do.
Right.
So generally the easiest way for me to do that has been do it early in the morning.
Right.
That's probably been my easiest way. Over time, I've thought to myself, I'll take my gear and I'll go for a run at lunch.
Yeah.
Or I'll finish up a little bit early. I'll get to work early. I'll do my day's work, and then at 4:30 or at 5, I might go for a run before it gets totally dark or something along those lines. And it's never worked for me.
Right.
Because I think once your day's in motion, there's always something else that'll drag your time.
Yeah.
And I think that probably gets harder and harder as you get more senior in an organisation, because people obviously need you to help out with different things. So for me, it's always been that early morning.
Yeah.
It's been interesting now moving over to the markets, at Sydney markets. Obviously, it's almost like a nocturnal economy in a lot of ways. So a lot of the days I'm there quite early, which means I'm not running before. So I am trying to adjust a little bit and maybe running in an afternoon or early evening.
Yeah.
But the thing for me has always been, as long as you're proactive in managing it, you don't give yourself the excuse.
Yeah.
Now, often what I'll do is just put my suit and my bag and my towel in the car the night before, just have my running shoes and my shorts and a running shirt next to my bed.
Yeah.
Then there's almost no excuse.
Yeah.
You get up, that's just, you just sort of almost default, and by the time you start running, you just haven't even really thought about it.
Right.
Rather than trying to say, in the morning I'll wake up, and I've read a lot about this too. Apparently there's a bit of the psychology in this, but rather than waking up and saying, well, let me go and find my runners, then I've got to go and find the pair of shorts I wanted to wear, and it's all too hard. I'll do it tomorrow. Yeah. For me, it's just about setting it all up and just making it as easy as possible.
Well, that's right. I think Barack Obama famously just wore a white shirt to make one less decision per day.
Yeah, right.
Every day.
Okay. Well, that's a good tip there.
White shirt.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the markets and your role there. Let's talk about that for a moment. But before we get to that, the industry, I hear a lot of people say you haven't worked in this industry or you don't have this sort of experience in understanding these acronyms, so no, you're not right for us. How have you crossed industries, and then what have you found going from a building company to would you call it a logistics retail business?
Yeah. And I mean, look, there are some property threads.
Uh-huh.
So there has been some consistency coming out of a whole sort of holistic property company across into Sydney markets.
Right.
Because obviously we're a landlord and sort of we are managing tenancies and doing all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt that it's a leap in terms of an industry because, like you suggested, it's a logistics business. It's an industrial kind of goods movements business. It's transport. It's refrigeration. It's warehousing. And then it's all of those internal logistics. So actually running a market, on behalf of thousands of people that are either buying or selling through that market, is incredibly complex and quite unique.
Yeah.
And so you're right, that idea of jumping across sectors or jumping across industries and having to do something that's not your experience or not in your wheelhouse, it's a bit intimidating.
Right.
Because I think it's that realization that I don't know everything, or I don't know anything in some respects. But to me, it's then always been, again, just come back to that authenticity point. I remember having the conversation with the board, and when I was interviewing for the role, and said exactly that, just call it out, saying, I'm not sure or I'm not certain whether my lack of experience in this part of the sector will be an advantage or a disadvantage.
Right.
But I'm hoping it will be an advantage and I'm thinking it will be an advantage because it will allow me to ask questions that will probably help me do my job better.
Yeah.
And they were awesome.
Yeah.
To be honest, the board were completely aligned with that and still are. I mean, I've only been there 8 months.
Yeah.
And I'm still asking a lot of questions.
Uh-huh.
And to be honest, I could be there for 5 years and be asking a lot of questions still, just because there's a lot of experience in the market. And people are really welcoming and really happy to help. So that's awesome. But equally too, there's a lot that people are happy to have challenged.
Yes.
And that's really surprised me in a positive way.
Yeah.
Because I think people realise, I mean, in our example here, so the market itself has been at Flemington for 50 years.
Yes.
Having moved from Haymarket at that time, back in 76. And in that time, obviously, the world's moved significantly.
Yeah.
Things have changed significantly over that time, but a lot of things at Sydney markets haven't changed.
Right.
Just because of, you're restricted by certain land usages and you the way certain things are done on the site.
Yeah.
So people are always open-minded enough to challenge those things. And I think coming in from outside the sector and being able to ask those questions, like I said, or challenge some of those assumptions, has probably been the best part of the first 8 months I've had in the role.
Yeah. And you told me there is that connection to Western Sydney and how they outgrew the fringe city. Well, they were in the city to begin with, weren't they?
They were.
Then they moved to the fringe of the city.
Yep.
And then you told me about this new technology that came along in the 50s.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, well, what it was that, it was actually a bit later than that. So I think it was about 50 years ago. They said because they were at the Haymarket at the time. And the way that the actual corridors worked between the market stalls, the way the road network worked, etc., they weren't going to be able to accommodate that new technology that was being introduced, which was the forklift.
The forklift.
Which is amazing to think backwards now because there's obviously new evolutions of that. And you look at the new technology that's coming in around robotics and AI and machine learning and all those sorts of things. It's just another quantum leap.
Yeah.
But you've got to hand it to the pioneers at the time because obviously the market itself is over 200 years old.
Yes.
There's its genesis was all the way back on the wharves of the first fleet.
Yeah.
And then it sort of moved progressively up through the city, spent some time around George Street, then eventually moved up to Haymarket. And then we still have a footprint at Haymarket, as you know, out at Paddy's. But obviously then that pioneering spirit that said, let's move out to Western Sydney, which will allow us not just to use the forklift, but able to enable the evolution of goods movements. At the time they were on a train line, bringing more stock in from interstate and the broader country areas. Yeah. And then over time, that's become more around road infrastructures and transport.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to think that they were able to pioneer that, 50 years ago and foresee that.
Yeah.
I've heard some stories that at the time they said, this site's way too big. We're never going to fill this. Look at the size of these sheds. How can we possibly have enough people to fill these sheds, etc.? But again, fast forward 50 years and we're almost at capacity.
Yeah.
We're landlocked and we're looking at that now, saying how do we more efficiently use the space we've got?
Yeah.
Because obviously over time population's growing and the throughput in the market's growing. And that ability to service those customers has become increasingly difficult just by virtue of those capacity constraints.
Yeah. And the markets will change again into the future with AI. From a CEO lens, how do you get your head around AI and how do you learn about it? Because it's not something that you and I have grown up with naturally.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, it's such an interesting space. I guess from my point of view personally, it's trying to read as much as I can about case studies, mainly, following people that are on the cutting edge of some of these technologies and how they're using AI in their businesses, to then coming all the way back to test cases.
Yeah.
How are we using AI in our own workplace? How are we doing our jobs more efficiently using AI?
Yeah.
And there's a huge gap between those things, because then the question becomes, how might AI affect the way our markets operate, or in particular the logistics side of a market.
Yeah.
But it is a fascinating space and it will evolve.
Yeah.
Like that's almost certain. The question is how do you sort of, I guess, sit between pioneering in that space and potentially spending a lot of money taking risks around how that might evolve versus a more conservative approach. And in our example, it's probably the latter, by virtue of the fact that we don't, as Sydney Markets Limited, we don't buy and sell fruit and vegetables.
Yeah.
We facilitate other businesses doing exactly that.
Yeah.
So being a pioneer and being really innovative in that space may not actually be in service of the hundreds of businesses that are actually using Sydney Markets to operate their businesses.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of being sensitive to that.
Yeah.
But thinking through the lens of customer experience and being able to position ourselves as best we can to service those businesses well into the future, we have to be considering these things for sure.
Yeah. And do you? I heard a term the other day. In fact, it was Helen Hamilton-James, who's a partner here at KPMG in Western Sydney. She mentioned the phrase reverse mentoring and using people within the business that understand those concepts better than maybe you and I do.
Yep.
And you talked about not being the subject matter expert. Do you have people floating around your life that help you with that?
Well, there's definitely people in the organisation that are a lot younger than me.
Yeah.
So that's the first place to start for sure. And they're using these technologies just to do their jobs better.
Yep.
So it's almost natural that they will start to influence people around them.
Yep.
And often that older generation for sure.
Yeah.
Having young kids, the way they're thinking about things and the way they interact with each other, like just all of those things are a glimpse into the future.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And if I think of, my role as a CEO, or any of us thinking of being in a leadership position now and positioning a business for the future, the reality is those people that we're watching now in their teens and early 20s will be the leaders in 20 years' time, and they will do things differently.
Yeah.
So it's more, I probably said it before in some respects, learning when to lean in and sort of help them think about certain areas, and then also being aware of when to just get out of the way and let them take the lead for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And where do you see the future of the markets here in Sydney? If I gave you a crystal ball 20 years from now, what would it look like if I walked around there at 4 a.m?
Yeah, good question. We're actually doing some deep thinking about that right now.
Right.
It's quite hard to envisage it, but just because there's so many things that have been done a certain way and that have worked so well for businesses for so long.
Yeah.
There are other things that I'm sure we haven't even considered as an organisation, or as those sort of, the businesses, our shareholders, our tenants, that we could be doing things very differently in the future. Yeah. So for me, it's about being really practical and understanding what are we actually in service of. We're in service of efficiency.
Yeah.
We're in service of making sure that the produce, because this is, I take a very philosophical view on this stuff. Australia is so lucky.
Yeah.
We're so lucky that we've got these amazing regions where these amazing people are producing amazing food. Like it's that we're so lucky. So to be able to make sure that we are facilitating that well into the future is a key part of what we have to consider.
Yeah.
So if you think about it from a Sydney market's point of view, we have to facilitate providing confidence to the growers that that's a great place to send their produce.
Yes.
For X, Y, or Z reasons.
Yeah.
Then we have to be competitive both from an efficiency point of view because it's a perishable, generally a perishable items.
Yep.
So how are we moving this stock? What's the cold storage chain? What are those sort of principles? But then also what's the whole value ecosystem? What's the value chain? How are we making sure that from a cost point of view, we can move the stock from where it's grown to where it gets consumed?
Yeah.
And this is everything from flowers all the way through to fruit, vegetables, etc., to where it's consumed as quickly as possible and for the minimum cost possible.
Yeah.
So you got to think about all those things before you then say, okay, well, what does that mean in terms of the market?
Yeah.
Are we set up in a way that enables that efficiency?
Yeah.
Are there better ways of setting up, the internal road systems and the way we actually take delivery of stock and get stock ready to move out again?
Yeah.
How are we using? It's a really interesting question around the hours in the day.
Yeah.
Because Sydney markets is this amazing place where you've got, as I said before, almost this nocturnal economy. It starts to get active from, maybe 10 o'clock at night through to sort of midnight. We start to have some trucks arrive. Then we start seeing a bit more activity between kind of 1 and 3.
Yeah.
Then between sort of 3 and 6, it's this hive of activity where there's still trucks coming in. There's people moving stock around the site. There's customers starting to come on site. You're starting to see trades. People are moving sort of goods in and out, and then customers are then sort of picking up their stock and leaving.
Yeah.
And that happens every day. So as you're sort of thinking about those things, how do we potentially use the day? Because if I go there at 3 o'clock this afternoon, there's nobody.
Yeah.
So there's this thing around using the 24 hours we have in a day better. That's one concept.
Yeah.
Using the square meters we have available to us. That's another concept.
Yeah.
And then just making sure that we're in service of the businesses that are operating through the markets becoming more and more efficient too.
Right.
So it's how are they connecting to customers?
Yeah.
How you mentioned before AI, but how do we have the digital tools available to us, because we're still in a pretty manual analog world out there at the moment. How do we introduce digital tools that enable people to run their businesses better, to become more profitable, to get more growth, in terms of throughput and volumes?
Yeah.
And ultimately, how are we servicing the people of New South Wales and beyond to get this amazing produce that we're so lucky to have?
Yeah, we are lucky, very much so. So there's a lot of stakeholders that you mentioned in that example. You've got your customers, you've got your suppliers, you've got the people that run the markets. How do you get I know you've only been there a little while, and it doesn't have to be market related, it can be career related, but how do you get people on the journey when you've got that many interested parties?
Yeah, look, and I think it's a perfect example to be asking the question on.
Yeah.
Sydney markets, just because there are so many varied interest groups, stakeholder groups. But to me, it's about the same principles you'd use anywhere. I'm sure you use them in your business. The idea of being transparent, and then high on engagement. Right. Asking the questions, being able to bring people along through their engagement.
Yeah.
And it sounds simple.
Yeah.
But I think I referenced it before when I said, I'm not an expert. I can't actually come in and tell these people how to be better fruit and vegetable and flower wholesalers.
Yeah.
I just don't. These guys have got decades of experience on me. But what I can do is ask them about their challenges.
Yes.
I can ask them about where they see opportunities.
Yeah.
I can run things past them and say, well, if we tweak this, what impact would that have? And is this a better way of thinking, and those sort of things? But you also have to be aware that the decisions you make and the decisions you have to make aren't going to make everyone happy either.
Yeah.
It's sort of that funny conundrum where you would love to think you've got this silver bullet that is a solution to everyone's problems and that takes advantage of all the opportunities ahead of us. And all you do is go, right, we're doing this now, and everyone says that's amazing,
right.
But it just can't be that.
Yeah.
And I think very young in my career, I had an experience where I knew that I'd made a few people unhappy about a decision.
Yeah.
And my dad said to me at the time, mate, if you want to make everyone happy, just go and buy an ice cream truck.
Right.
But if you want to be a senior leader in a business, you're going to have to be prepared to make decisions with the right approach, the right conviction, the right engagement. But you're going to have to, make those decisions, and that's what leaders have to do.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll have to do here. There's no doubt. We have to stand for something. We've got to have an ambition as an organisation, and we've got to have a view on the future, and then a very clear path to achieve that.
Yep.
And by doing that, it might mean that certain business models have to change. And it might mean that the way we use space and time might change a little bit.
Yep.
And not everyone will agree with that
Yep.
from the outset. But going back to your first point, if you're doing that with the right level of engagement and the right attitude and the right sort of, I guess, ideal,
Yep.
Which is we want to make this a better place for everyone, and this is how we think we're going to do it.
Yep.
Then I think generally, even if you make decisions that aren't going to make people happy, they will still hopefully have respect over the way you've made those decisions.
Yes. So Anthony, you've worked in Western Sydney a lot, if not in person from a project point of view. What do you see? What is it about Western Sydney that makes Western Sydney so good?
Yeah, there's lots of things.
Yeah.
It's not just the one thing. I mean, as you said, I've at the Australand days and into the Frasers days, we obviously had our head office at Rhodes.
Yep.
But as you suggested, whether it was in the logistics industrial space or in the residential development space, we've often been in Western Sydney corridors.
Yep.
So very familiar with that sort of area. And it's sort of interesting from a couple of perspectives. One is recruiting people over time. I mean, you do this for a living, but even when we've been looking to bring people on in those businesses, some people just say, I don't want to go further east.
Yeah.
Maybe Homebush is sort of that cutoff or whatever. So that's interesting as a mentality. But I also think I've been very fortunate to spend time in other cities.
Yeah.
And in particular in Australia, and you think about the scale of Western Sydney.
Yeah.
And it is genuinely a city in itself. And I get really excited about the opportunities that presents, because when you think about the population growth that Sydney's going to experience, you think then about business investment. You think about the public sector, the government investment that's happening, and a huge majority of it is geared towards the West.
Yeah,
because it's a natural thing. I mean, it is a lot of cities when they expand, it sort of becomes a geographical expansion. You can't always just go up.
Yeah.
But you look at all those businesses that have kind of moved operations out to Western Sydney. That the new airport is just an incredible once in 100 years.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even say it's once in a generation in terms of government having the forethought to say, all right, let's go and invest in something like this. Let's build the infrastructure around it. In terms of roads and rail and metro and all those sorts of things. Then what that allows people to do is have that confidence in, and you know what the people of Western Sydney are like, very passionate, very proud of where they come from, just provides more and more opportunity to create jobs, to create lifestyle, to create amenity. And so to me, it's just this, it's like a big snowball of momentum. And I think of it through the lens of Sydney markets. And over the course of that same 50 years that we've spoken about. So when they moved from Haymarket out to Flemington, at the time that was basically the edge of Sydney, really. In terms of at least population, of course people were living to the west of Sydney markets, but it wasn't a big population centre. So most of the produce would be heading east out of the markets. So to come in from the, in from the west and then here. Now there's quite a lot of goods movements that are going west of the markets, because Flemington now is, it's basically the centre of Sydney, right?
Yeah.
Homebush sort of Flemington area. And you think that's only going to increase in terms of just the number of people that will be living and working and operating businesses out in that western corridor. So, I see it as a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
I think, this has been a great period of growth and investment in infrastructure for New South Wales.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always that way. I often used to think, Melbourne and even Brisbane used to have it ahead of us because they were just so much smarter about building the infrastructure before they sort of sent people out there. New South Wales have kind of reversed that now, and that's been something they've done really well. So, and if you look at everything from the road network, as we said, to then having this brand new airport available, that'll be a 24/7 operation, and think about that as a game changer for business. That's a pretty awesome time for Sydney.
They'll be nocturnal as well with you guys.
Totally. Well, I mean, I think it's one of those opportunities when you think about what Australia is well known for on a global stage. Yes, some of it'll be medical research, some of it'll be education, and all those things will thrive.
Yeah.
But it is food.
Yeah.
It is produce.
Yeah.
So whether that's anything from sort of seafood and protein all the way through to the stuff that Sydney Markets does so well, which is, fruit and vegetables, that could be an evolving trend.
Yeah. That
continues, where you've got, like I said, capitalising on what we're so lucky to be able to do in all these regions, and be able to think of that as an evolving customer space. That's something we'd have to consider for sure.
Yeah. Well, you've been a great guest to have on, Anthony. Thank you very much for giving up time. One last question I've got for you. You've had a great career. You really have, and congratulations for that. And it's come with hard work and challenges, I'm sure. But what do you want your legacy to be when you retire?
Oh, good question. And thank you, by the way. Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's been great to talk about it, and I always enjoy catching up with you and getting your insights as well. But I look, from a legacy perspective, it's probably more personal than professional.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's just that I would love to be remembered as someone who people enjoyed working with, that hopefully people felt good to be around, that had sort of a positive outlook on life. I think that I'd love to have that as a legacy, and if that's had a professional impact on people, that's even better too. That fact that, we've been able to, like you said, I've been very fortunate in my career. I feel really lucky to have had the opportunities that I've had, and I've loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
But to think I've had an influence on that in a way to maybe have a positive outlook and leave those businesses in a better place, then that'll be a great legacy.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful, Anthony. Thank you very much for appearing on the Westside Stories today.
No, welcome. Thanks for having me.
That's it for today's episode of Westside Stories Beyond the CBD. If you enjoyed it, follow the show and leave a quick rating or review. It always helps more people find the stories. And if there's someone in Western Sydney whose story you think deserves a microphone, send me a message. I'm Sean Johnston. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.